Welcome to the Veterans Impact Show, where our commitment is to help, hope, and healing of our veteran family and our nation. I'm Jim Blythe, a U.S. Navy veteran and a certified senior advisor. Join us as we continue the mission of leadership and commitment to our communities and our great country. Why, you never know where we're going to go or who you're going to meet. We invite you to join in, plug in, and share in what we do. This is your Veterans Impact Show. Well, great day and welcome aboard. I'm Jim Blythe, U.S. Navy veteran, and I have a very special program for you today. You are going to enjoy this so much with a very, very good friend of mine. But real quick, I want to say a few things. I want to say thank you to the DBTV network and AUN for putting us on the air. DBTV puts us on Amazon Fire, Roku, smart TVs, Apple TV. We're on at 11 o'clock on Saturdays and 7 o'clock on the evenings, Tuesday evenings. Sorry about that. But I want to thank them very much. And I want to thank my sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage. And my mortgage number is NMLS number 311548, and the corporate one is 2289, equal opportunity lender, and therefore I've made the attorneys happy. I also want to say a special thank you to Symbiosis Integrative Health. Hey, Symbiosis has survived all of the things, and we are up and running and going. So if you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and you need medical help and you know what Symbiosis is, look us up, symbiosisccn.com. All right, now I've got a very special guest who I met literally 10 years ago. And he was an admiral, and I'll never forget the PAO for the Joint Reserve Base comes running up to me before a football game, and he said, "I've got this admiral in tow, and I don't know what to do with him." I said, "Hey, let's do an interview." And come to find out, you were vice commander of recruiting for the Navy.
I was.
And an F-18 jock, which I related to because I had been in naval aviation. So we stood in front of a big display deal, and we did a great interview and became friends. And he has been on my program many times. So I'd like to introduce to you Admiral Woody Beal, better known as Woody.
There you go. Jim, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
It's always fun. And it's not, I called him up one time. This is a true story. I called him up one time and he said, "Are you looking for a program, Jim?" And I go, "Yeah." I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "Bahrain." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm vice commander of the 5th Fleet." I go, "Wow. Well, let's do it." And so we put together, and probably the best interview I've ever had was with Woody live in Bahrain, and I was in the United States, and it was amazing. So thank you for that. And I also want to thank you because you're an aerobatic pilot, and on my birthday, he takes me flying. And it was so much fun. We had a ball. And I didn't get sick.
That's
I wanted
what happens.
to.
No, that's what happens though when you're with a recovering fighter pilot. So we got to fly upside down now and then.
It was fun. It was a ball. It was a ball. Okay, so much for the fun part. I have a call to action for young men and women who want to pursue an aviation career. So I talked to you about being part of this and telling your story. So first of all, tell us a little bit about your story, how you got through college, how you got into the Navy, and how many times people said no to you and you just kept trucking.
Well, so first of all, as a fighter pilot, the best thing about being a fighter pilot is there's nothing I like to talk about more than me. And when I'm done talking about me, I want you to talk about me for a little while. So that's just the way that works. It's interesting. My path into aviation really started when I was 8 years old. I saw a crippled DC-3 fly over my house, one engine shut down, smoke and flames coming out of that left engine. And for whatever reason, that made little young Woody think that being a pilot would be what I wanted to do. And when the testosterone kicked in at around age 13, bam, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And that's all I wanted to be for the rest of my life. Now, my folks took me out and tried. They were very supportive. I grew up in literally a home with a white picket fence in the Midwest. Loving parents, great family. And mom and dad on a trip took me out to the Air Force Academy and said, if you want to be a pilot, this is the way we can afford for you to be a pilot. You find yourself a free college education, go to the Air Force Academy. And I thought, yeah, that's it. I'm going to do that. Later on, they took me to the Naval Academy and they said, here's another place where you can go to school for free. And I said, I'm not joining the Navy. I don't even like the Navy. Why? The Navy doesn't fly airplanes. I had no idea what I was talking about. Wouldn't even get out of the car. And trust me, I still hear about that from them today. I skipped the Naval Academy tour and thought I was going to go to the Air Force. Well, sadly, the Air Force didn't work out for me. The Air Force said no. And it was a medical issue that was really me being a little too honest on a questionnaire. We won't go into it. But I got a little too honest, and the Air Force said rejected. And that was it. And back in 1981, you couldn't fix that with an email or even a quick phone call or a fax, because those things didn't really exist.
Yeah.
So on from that and working extraordinarily hard through high school to get to that point, it was a grave disappointment. But my backup plan was, okay, I'm good at math and science. I'm good at physics. I love airplanes. How about, maybe applying to Purdue University and paying my way through college in that in-state school? It's a great institution. And let's just go to Purdue. So Purdue University, 4 years. But as I discovered, Purdue, at the time, aerospace engineering was more about the tools that we used to figure out thrust, drag, how to minimize drag, how to increase lift, and it was about coming up with those tools that we would eventually program into a computer. There was very little talk about aircraft design, aircraft decision making, and so when it came to airplanes, not so much. When it came to math and science, quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I hated it. Hated every minute of it. Hated going to school. Hated being in the program. But I was too doggone stubborn to change my major or to quit. My senior year at Purdue, a friend of mine comes up to me and says, "Hey, there's this Navy recruiter on the mall that says he'll give you a contract in writing for aviation." And I went and talked to this guy. And at the time, Navy recruiting, I wish they still had this, but Navy recruiting had 41 recruiting districts, and each recruiting district had a T-34 Bravo. And that little airplane with a Continental 6-cylinder up in the front was fully aerobatic. And when you told the recruiter you wanted to be an aviator, if you passed the test, he'd put you in the back seat, and he squirrel caged the heck out of that booger.
How fun.
Kind of what I did to you in the decathlon.
Yeah.
Same thing.
But I love it.
Oh, man, it was a hoot. And when we landed, I pulled out the checkbook and said, I'll pay for the next tank of gas. Let's do it again. And the recruiter said, no, doesn't work that way. So I signed up for that. That was when I said, okay, it's Navy all the way. And I had looked at a couple of other options, including the Air National Guard. But once I took that airplane ride, that was it. I was hooked, line and sinker. So that's how I started. And in fact, my career, 35 years, 13 years active duty, 22 years in the reserves, my career was mostly folks telling me, no, you can't do that. Every time I had a no answer, I would start, down one road. No, you can't go that way. Well, I'll find another road. So that was my entire career. And that would be my message to any young person who wanted to join any Navy or any service. You want to get in? Okay, great. Remember, it's a journey. It's not a destination. On that journey, people are going to tell you no. When they tell you no, find another way.
Not only find another way, but have an attitude of gratitude.
Absolutely.
And an attitude of persistence. And I know you pretty well because you hang her across from Ashley and I, and you're in there working, you're building a plane right now. You've got the decathlon. And I got to tell you, your persistence, your quality, the quality work you're doing I watched you working on that plane, and actions speak louder than words. But in the Navy, my observation, especially since I've been doing this for 10 years, is men and women who make to flag rank are special. I mean, they're special in that they've got that perseverance. They've got that stick to this. They've got that take initiative. They've also got the adaptability. Well, this didn't quite work, so I'm going to do that. And I got to tell you, for a young man or young woman, you get out of college and you go into a naval flight program,
you're going to be flying a plane in what, 5-6 months? You're not going to be flying one of the fighters, but you're going to be flying.
Yeah, you'll have your first training command flight no later than 6 months in. You will see 3 months of officer candidate school. That'll be up in Newport, Rhode Island. And then there'll be about 2 or 3 months of ground school and indoctrination and water survival. And then you're off to fly in an airplane.
Now, Woody, what if somebody goes to a naval ROTC? There's one at the University of Texas. There's one at Oklahoma. There's a bunch of them around the nation. If you graduate from that in that program, don't you go straight into the military, not going into OCS?
Sure.
Okay.
So three paths to get a commission in the United States Navy or any one of the services. The first path is one of the service academies, which is what I tried to do at first. So Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, West Point, Coast Guard, those are the places that you would go. The second offering is ROTC. Now, ROTC will pay for your college tuition. Sometimes they will pay for your room and board. The Air Force has a program called the Commander Scholarship, where the commander of the ROTC unit will pay the full Monty for all of your college education. So that's something that is available as well. And the last way is what I did, which was officer candidate school. So you come in with a college degree that you paid for, and the Navy or the Air Force says, okay, we're going to send you off to this officer candidate school or officer training school in the Air Force. And after 3 months, boom, we give you a commission, and you're off to flight school or off to be an officer in that service.
And one of the things a lot of people, they may say, well, Jim, I don't want to be a pilot. I want to be a doctor. Guess what? The Navy will put you through medical school if you can qualify. Mm-hmm. And you can start being a doctor the day you get out of medical school, because I think you go to Balboa or you go to, one of the major military hospitals or Navy hospitals. So there's fabulous programs to jumpstart your life.
Sure.
And there's fabulous programs that basically you got to prove, correct me if I'm wrong, that you've got the tenacity, you've got the desire, and you got the education. You got to have the smarts.
Absolutely.
And so therefore, I know several people who are incredibly smart. They were bored to death in school. Mm-hmm. They lacked that perseverance. They lacked that determination.
That was me, Jim.
Yeah.
I didn't lack the determination. What I lacked was the love of what I was doing, because studying aerospace engineering was as far from being a pilot of an aircraft as you could get. What's ironic about that is years later, when I was a two-star, the folks at Purdue came back to me and said, hey, we'd like you to accept an award as a distinguished aerospace engineering alumni. And I said, you better go back and check my college transcripts, and you'll figure out that I'm not your guy. I'm not the one that you want to be in that. And in fact, I eventually accepted the award, but showed up that year. One of my professors, in fact, a guy who gave me a C, presented the award to me, and for me it was quite comical. And I turned to him and I said, I got a C in your class. And the guy said, the professor said, it's not about what you did when you were here, it's about what you did after you left.
That's a key thing for somebody to say. That's a real mentoring type of moment.
Yeah.
From that, the first time you flew, you were talking about with the recruiter. Again, you probably went back to the T-34 in Pensacola?
Well, yes. So it was a different T-34 because they put a turboprop engine in the front of it, but it was the T-34. And it's ironic that my first flight as pilot in command of an aircraft was a T-34, and my last flight as pilot in command of an aircraft was in a T-34 as an instructor.
Yeah.
So I had a great career from that standpoint as a reservist. I'd been flying at that point for 23 years with the Navy, and I had the privilege of being a flight instructor and teaching young men and women, how to be naval aviators, how to fly the airplane, how to fly it on instruments, how to do formation, how to fly a proper landing, how to do proper aerobatics. Teaching aerobatics and teaching formation were two of the most fun things that I could have ever done.
Oh,
I loved doing that.
I got to tell you, it's amazing too how the military changed me.
Yeah.
Now, I had the same thing. I went to SMU, hated the programs that I was in, but I said, enough is enough, and I went into the Navy as an enlisted man.
Mm-hmm.
I missed out, I think, by not having the ability to change direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think had I gone down to the University of Texas and found out about the Naval ROTC program, it would have changed my life. The other thing I wanted to do was the reserves. Here's another thing. The reserves is a great opportunity to get in and get that boot camp and get that change, that change of attitude, of persistence and dedication, and get it done, get the mission done.
Absolutely. So the reserves for the Navy is a great way to retain the training and the investment that the Navy has made with you when you were on active duty. So I used to tell people this all the time as deputy commander of Navy recruiting. If you're in active duty and you're leaving, you need to come back. You need to stay and be in the reserves. There are benefits in the reserves. When you retire as a reservist, you get the medical care. When you retire as a reservist, you will get a pension, and it may start at age 60, or you may buy that back depending on how much active duty you do as a reservist. My retirement was supposed to start at age 60 initially. I did so much active duty time as a reservist that it actually, for me, started at age 57.
Wow.
So I picked up a retirement check about 6 months after I actually retired from the reserves. So it worked out for me very, very well.
Yeah.
I wasn't in it for the retirement, though. I wasn't in it for the money. I was in it because I loved it. I loved serving. I loved the people. I loved the mission. And quite frankly, I love this nation. And it's the greatest country on the planet. We all have to recognize that. And being in the greatest country on the planet, I want to defend that country.
And you and I have had an opportunity to go to other places on this planet that aren't so great. And we served and we defended them. I was in aircraft carriers in Vietnam, an enlisted man. It's a tremendous opportunity for a young man or woman to change their course of their life. And maybe you're not going to start off as an officer. Maybe you're going to have to start as enlisted. There are programs within the enlisted rank to get you up to speed. If you're really good, they've got that. I think they still have the NESEP program that the Navy will put you into college if you're an enlisted man. I don't know.
We don't call it the NESEP program anymore, but there is a program like that.
All right.
Yeah, you bet.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be right back after these words. This is Veterans Impact Show. We're here for you.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
Man, this is so much fun for me because this is not only a retired Navy admiral and an American Airlines captain, but a real good friend. He hangers right across from where my son and I. And you spent some time with my son, actually mentoring him and helping him and talking to him.
Sure.
And he's become a tremendous mechanic. One of the things that I've found is when you really understand the mechanical side of it, you understand what not only makes a plane fly, but what makes it not fly, you become a better pilot. He's an incredibly good pilot. Way back when I was his age, I was a good pilot, but then life changed and I had to set back for a year or two or 3 or 30. Anyway, that's an important thing, is learning that engineering, not the engineering you're talking about of how do you build a rocket ship, but how do you keep that thing going? The book that I read about Eddie Redenbacher, the World War I ace, my God, he was a tremendous mechanic before he ever got in a plane.
Sure.
And really understood strategy. Now, here's another thing. If you really have the chance as a young man, young woman, to focus and learn how to use strategy, you're going to be a winner.
Yeah.
Now,
strategy. Okay, a couple things. Number one, Ashley is, I don't know if I mentor him as much as he mentors me. He helps me in general aviation, and he'll come over and help me work on the plane and make sure that it's good to go. So we have kind of let's say we've established an economy of sorts.
Yeah.
I give him some advice. He gives me some mechanic work. It works out. And quite frankly, I'll take him up in the decathlon a few more times, and it'll be good. Strategy, that's interesting. It's the study of ends, ways, and means.
Right.
So where are you trying to go? What do you have that'll get you there? And how will you use those resources that you have to get to that place? Typically, the United States, we're not that good at strategy. We're pretty good at tactics and operations. We're not all that great at strategy. Part of that is the way the government is set up. Still, we do it better. We do government better than I think just about anybody else.
Okay, so in tactics as well as strategy, would you please tell your combat air story, starting with what you did in Somalia, which set you up to do what you did in Iraq? And see, I think that's an incredible story. Nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt. Well, at least not seriously hurt. It starts out in Somalia. It's the fall of 1992. I'm flying an A6 Intruder. My bombardier navigator is a guy named Ozzy. Ozzy is a federal district court judge now, so no longer flying airplanes. But Ozzy and I are flying a combat air patrol mission in Somalia. We talked to a forward air controller. The forward air controller happens to be a former instructor of mine. And he is directing a relief convoy of UN food relief for starving Somalians in that country. Now, the carrier was only parked about 5 miles off the coast, literally 5 miles off the coast. One of the few places on the planet you can do that because A, the water is deep enough, and B, there were no defenses ashore that could have shot at the carrier. So the carrier was really close. You'd shoot off the deck, you'd turn right, 5 miles later, you're over the beach. So that's what we ended up doing. Our FAC, our forward air controller, says, I need you to go up the road and find me we know that there are some thugs in a technical, which is essentially a white Toyota truck with a 50 caliber machine gun in the back of it. And we need you to go find those guys. So we go up the road about 30 or 40 miles. And sure enough, there's this one lone truck coming southbound on that same road towards the relief convoy, and the truck is loaded down with Somalis. These gang members that work for Mohammed Farah Aidid, who was the leader of the terrorist organization in Somalia at the time. And these guys there are probably 12 to 15 of them in this little Toyota truck, just stacked up in like cordwood. We decide, hey, I got to take a video of this. So I tell my bombardier navigator, let me fly away from the road. The road goes north-south. I'm going to fly out to the east. We're going to get down low. We're going to get fast. And I'm going to perform what we called a standard 30-30 pop-up attack. And the 30-30 pop essentially looks like this. You turn inbound. You're going as fast as you can get the airplane to go. You go 30 degrees right at about 4 Gs, 30 degrees up at about 4 Gs. When you get up over the top, you overbank the aircraft to about 120 degrees. You apex at about 3,000 feet. When you roll wings level, you're at about 2,300 feet in a 10-degree dive. You're pointing right at that truck. What I didn't consider when we came up with this plan is, what does that look like to the guys in the truck?
Frightening.
Yeah, it was frightening because they'd all watched the Desert Storm stuff on TV. They have TVs in Somalia. They'd all watched that, and they'd seen what the U.S. military could do with air power. When we pointed at them with weapons on the wings, 3 Rockeyes and one 1,000-pound laser-guided bomb, that truck took a right 90, ran away from us on the road, and everybody bailed out of the truck. First, the truck got stuck. The gun got thrown out one side. Everybody else went out the other side. They all dove into the dirt as we recovered from our dive, got the whole thing on video because that's all we were doing was taking pictures. And as we turned out, my bombardier navigator is in the hood that he was looking at his FLIR video through. He's in the hood. He's laughing hysterically. And laughing so hard that as I pulled off target and got my nose up, I turned over my shoulder, looked over my shoulder to see these guys. And sure enough, they're scrambling around in the dirt thinking that we might come back. We did not. Fortunately, problem solved. Guys are off the road. Forward air controller's happy. Relief convoy gets to the destination and delivers the food to the people who it was intended for. That was the first part of the story. The second part of the story is, fast forward, now I'm a F-18 pilot in Iraq. Flying off of USS Theodore Roosevelt, my wingman is a guy named Moose. It's spelled M-O-U-S-S-E because the guy used an incredible amount of product in his hair.
Okay.
Are you advertising product?
Huh?
Are you advertising product like hair gel?
No,
Not
but
today.
we advertise mortgages with Fairway and Symbiote being healthy. So we're going to take a break in just a minute, but I hate to interrupt because this is a really great story. When you hear this, you're going to die laughing, as well as you're going to realize the power of air power, of naval air power, Air Force air power. When you absolutely control the air, you control the ground as well if you choose to. And so one of the things in understanding this, you're understanding a little bit of not only tactics, but strategy, how you can defeat the enemy without ever firing a shot. You scare them half to death. So we're going to be right back after these words from our sponsors. Fairway, thank you. Fairway Mortgage, nationwide company. I love it. Faith-based company. We'll be right back. This is Veterans Impact Show.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
So,
Oh man, I had to interrupt Woody right in the middle of a war story. Now, I forgot to bring my challenge coin. I could end up buying the whole round of drinks.
we'll be okay.
Okay. Let's go back to this story. Now you're in Iraq.
Now I'm in Iraq. I'm a reservist. I'm with VFA 201, Reserve F-18 Squadron out of Fort Worth, Texas, and we are flying combat operations from USS Theodore Roosevelt, which is stationed in the Mediterranean. So in order to make these missions happen, we launch off the ship, we hit the S-3 tanker, we get a little bit of gas, just a little bit of a top off, and then we fly across the southern border of Turkey, where Turkey meets Syria and where Turkey meets Iraq. And then we fly into Iraq, where the Air Force has a stack of Air Force big wing tankers, and we get more gas. After you get your gas, you check out from the tanker, you check in with the AWACS, the E3. And this is the giant 707 with a big frisbee on the top. And those guys are the airborne combat commanders. They direct what missions we're going to get assigned to. This is my third night in Iraq in 2003. It's my third mission. The first two missions I was launching harm. This one I've got bombs on the aircraft, and I'm ready to get a kill box and a tactical air control party on the ground that will direct where my weapons were going.
And it's at night.
It's at night. This is 2 a.m, 1 a.m, somewhere in that time frame, deep in the night, over Iraq. What they end up doing is saying, hey, we don't have a kill box for you or a tactical air control party. What we do have is we need you to go down and find an infrared strobe. So both Moose and I are wearing night vision devices. They've become very common at that time. And so it's nighttime. We're on the night vision devices. You can see an infrared strobe on the ground when you're wearing goggles, when you're wearing those night vision devices. You can't see it naked eye. As we get down there, or get close to it, a couple of F-16s that are orbiting overhead say, hey, we haven't been able to find anything. We're low on gas. We got to run. And they go. We actually see them in our goggles as they depart to the south and go home. We end up, just after that, seeing them. And I said, look, Moose, I think I see a guy. He's about 11 o'clock, 30 miles. That looks like an infrared strobe. And Moose says, it sure does. That's it. As we get towards the infrared strobe, I realize my mission is to get a precise location on that, because that's probably where the friendlies are, or they're in the vicinity of it. We don't know exactly where they are.
It's
we know
dark.
that there's
You can't
somebody
see.
there. Can't see anything. Don't know. Now, what I do notice is there are headlights, spotlights, flashlights. The Iraqis are looking for the same folks that we're looking for. They don't have night vision devices. They can't see the infrared strobe. I tell Moose, here's my plan. That Somalia thing comes to mind. So the first thing I have to do is get my nose on that strobe so that I can get the coordinates from it. That's the first thing. But after that, why don't we set up what looks like a bombing pattern? We'll be 180 degrees out from each other. We'll fly these counter-rotating dives, and you be across the circle from me. You dive, I'll come off. I'll dive, you come off. We'll just take turns diving in. But instead of diving in on the strobe, let's dive in on each headlight, spotlight, and flashlight, all that cultural lighting, and let's see if we can scare them. And by the way, I'm going to turn my lights on, and when we climb out, I'm going to hit afterburner, because I want them to see me and I want them to hear me. I want them to know that I'm there.
And an F-18, if you've never been to an air show or you've never been around it, the ground shakes when one of those things, and not that much altitude. I mean, that is one of the most deafening things in the world when you go to afterburner.
And at night, that afterburner appears to be blue.
Yeah,
So
huge.
it's a giant blue flame on the climb out. We don't turn our lights on at night because we don't want people to see us so they can shoot at us. At that night, the great thing was every time one guy was in the dive, the other guy's looking down at the ground to see if anybody's shooting. We got low, we got down there, and we took a little bit of a risk, and we even took a little bit of a risk on fuel. But every time we dived in on a light, that light would extinguish.
Yeah.
Every time we dived in on something on the ground, that would extinguish. So I knew we were getting their heads down. Now, we had bombs on the aircraft, but I didn't feel comfortable dropping them because I didn't know where the friendlies were.
You
not
didn't know where
for
you
sure.
were. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the problem. So the best thing we could do, sometimes the hardest thing you do when you've got a trigger full of weapons is not pulling that trigger. The biggest thing that we did that night, I think the best thing we did, was used restraint. And we got them to put their heads down. But by the time we were done with that first visit, we were low on gas. We were so low that Moose, being the wingman, was lower than me. We got back to the tanker, and I said, hey, man, you need to get into the tanker first and just take a sip because I don't have much gas either. But I don't think we could have made the divert field in Diyarbakir, Turkey, had we not had the tanker not worked, we would probably have been riding silk.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was a real
At night.
risk. Yeah, it was a real risk that night.
In
It
a
was a risk
hospital.
we were willing to take because we had friendlies on the ground that
Yeah.
needed our support.
What's interesting is who were the friendlies?
Well,
That
that's the
was
funny
interesting.
part. We didn't know who they were, and it was funny. Even after the AWACS passed me a call sign, I tried to reach them. I tried to reach them on both emergency frequencies, both the search and rescue frequencies. Couldn't get a hold of them, and so I was never able to talk to those guys. The next day, I get told, "Hey, look, you've been on the flight schedule 3 days in a row. That's not fair to the other pilots. You get to ride the desk and run the flight schedule." So I was the duty officer. I'm sitting duty the very next day after flying that 7.5-hour mission and coming back to the ship. And as I'm sitting there running the duty, an intel officer walks in and he says, "Hey, who was the guy that was the lead on Cujo 3-3 last night?" And I said, "Well, that was me." And he goes, "Oh, congratulations, sir. You saved the lives of 2 squads of British SAS." And I said, "Oh, that's amazing." Had no idea. But apparently at the coordinates that I passed back to the AWACS from that infrared strobe, they were able to send what they call a trap team, a combat search and rescue team. The trap team went in with the Sandies, cleared the area, landed, 12 guys live, all the Brits. They say, "Woody, you're drinking free beer for life next time you come to England." And I'm super happy about that. But that was the story. What gets interesting is that a couple years later, I wasn't the only guy looking for those folks. F-16s apparently were also looking. You can find videos online of F-16 pilots telling their version of the story. All good stuff, and I'm not here to question veracity of their versions of that story. What's interesting is that we did find them, which was good. But later, after I was promoted to be an admiral, I happened to find myself in Paraguay, of all places. And here I am in Paraguay, and I'm at the ambassador's residence at a reception, wearing my blues, medals everywhere, and I get approached by this Navy SEAL. And first of all, what's a Navy SEAL doing in Paraguay? You don't see that, especially during the global war on terror. And the SEAL walks up to me and says, "Hey, you got to tell me about I see a V on your medals, that combat V. Tell me about that mission." And I said, it was no big deal. I tried to feign a little modesty, and that didn't work. The SEAL was having none of it. So he said, no, tell me about the mission. And so I tell him the whole story. And he says, "That's a great story." He goes, "I've already heard that story. And by the way, those weren't SAS, the British version of Special Forces. Those were SBS." And I said, "What in the heck is an SBS? I've never heard of that before." And he goes, SBS is Special Boat Squadron. That's the British version of the SEALs. And I know this story because those were my guys.
Wow.
2 months before, 2 months before that incident, he had been in command of one of those platoons as a young lieutenant. Now, he was an 05 when I met him, but as a young lieutenant, he'd been in command of one of those platoons. So when this had happened to them and they'd been overrun for several days with Iraqis looking for them everywhere, they were on the run, they were hiding, they were putting out the infrared strobe, they were on the radio trying to get support. A couple days before we were there was a sandstorm that slowed everybody down, but air power couldn't get them until we found them that one fine evening. And it was amazing to me that A, this is a small world, and B, my favorite mission, the mission that I loved the most, was a mission where I didn't have to fire a shot.
Was Ken George the ambassador to Paraguay at that time?
The lady who was the ambassador, she was female. It wasn't Ken George, and I don't remember her name off the top of my head.
I know Ken George. He came and speak at Navy League, and it was amazing what he talked about. Who thinks of Paraguay? That's a breadbasket of South America. Mm-hmm. That is a hugely important country. So that is a phenomenal story.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's kind of amazing. And here are the takeaways for me. Number one, you never know what lies ahead of you. Number two, do your job. Thankful attitude. Think while you're flying an airplane, and guess what? You might impact somebody else's life. By the way, I've never drank an ounce of that free beer. I never saw a bit of it. So those guys aren't good for their bets. But
I hate to tell you, but as a predecessor of where you were, I drank the beer. I got to go to rum ration aboard a British destroyer, the HMS Diane. Holy cow. Those guys can drink and sing like angels. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah. You give a Brit 2 or 3 bottles of beer or 2 or 3 bottles of Guinness. My God, they all become Pavarotti.
Yes, and you can't keep up with them either.
No.
It's pretty scary.
No.
I love the Brits. They're good fighters. They're a great ally. They're a special partner to the United States. They're fantastic, and they've always been right alongside us.
Depart from the thing. I wanted to ask you a question, if you maybe know, because somebody told me that our original SEAL teams were trained by British. These same deal. I was told that this is where we came from. Was from the British Royal Marines and the British SAS.
Maybe true. Don't know. I'm not the expert on the SEALs. All I know is that if I mess with them, I might be in trouble.
Oh, definitely. And I knew British Royal Marines. I knew the British Royal First Welch. I knew the British Navy. I almost think, boy, if the Navy had said, "Hey, Jim, do you want to go do a cross decks and serve with the British Navy as an exchange?" Yeah, I'm on my way.
Came really close to doing that myself.
I bet you did.
Yeah.
I bet you did.
Yeah. Almost flew Sea Harriers with the Brits. That was one of my.
That would have been phenomenal.
I passed on it at the advice of a good friend and former commanding officer of mine. But I was this close, so close that we were trying to figure out how to sell all the appliances and the cars, and we actually had written orders when I left China Lake as a test pilot.
So you would have gone to England then? I
would have gone to England, to Yeovilton, and I would have flown the Sea Harrier, which had a radar in it called a Blue Fox radar and was equipped with the AMRAAM and did some things that our Harriers did not do. And so that would have been an interesting twist to my career. What this mentor of mine said was, you probably don't want to do that. And the reason you don't want to do that is because I know that you want to continue to serve in the Navy, and that'll be a dead end for you. It would have been a poor career choice.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
One of the points you also made that I would like to go back and make, because I made the mistake of not doing it. When I got out of the Navy, I had opportunity to go into Navy Reserve. Mm-hmm. I would have picked up my E5. I made E5, but they said, you got to ship over. And I said, no, I'm going to college. I was accepted down at the University of Texas. And so I did not do that. If I had done that, I probably would have stayed in quite a bit longer, because everybody I know who did do that went from enlisted to went back to college, got the opportunity to go to OCS. And some of them, I mean, one of my closest friends, Mike Carruthers, ended up retiring as an 06. And so he's got huge pension. But more than that, the things he got to do, because he went to work with Raytheon, where things started crossing over. And I might have been able to do something like that too. The world of the reserves opened some huge doors.
Yes.
And so I want to make a statement across the board, nationwide. You're listening to me anywhere in the world. When your deal is up, if you're enlisted, even an officer, and you have the opportunity, then stay in the reserves. The opportunities are great. You'd be amazed what you might get. Correct?
I agree with you. I think the reserves are as strong as they've ever been, much stronger than they were, let's say, when I first affiliated with the reserves in 1999. There were many parts of the U.S. Navy Reserves that, let's say, needed some operational sprucing up. As I left the reserves in 2021, that had been fixed, mostly by 9/11 and by operations that were going on in the world. We couldn't do anything without reservists. When I was at Whiting as an instructor and as a reserve instructor pilot, 20% of all training that active duty pilots received came from reserve pilots. You literally couldn't do the mission in the training command without the reserves. It's still that way. And I would say that the reserves, here's a policy thing that I would tell our government now. We need more reservists, not less. Every time there's a budget crisis, the military, the Pentagon looks toward the reserves and says, we need to cut that out. We need to make less of that. In reality, I could run an F-18 squadron in the reserves for about 1/10 of the cost of an active duty squadron. It was amazing how much you get, and with the best F-18 pilots that the Navy had ever seen. Folks in that squadron were literally some of the best pilots I've ever flown with in my life. And several of them, I will never tell them that to their face. But I have to say that they were, now, for me, I felt like the water boy on an all-star team. I mean, that's some high-quality H2O that I was giving them, but I was not what I would call the best pilot in the squadron. We had some really, really good pilots. And so if you can take a squadron that literally has, well, let's look at an active duty F-18 squadron, 230 people, all active duty, all the medical care, all the dependent care, all of the pension, you have to give them all of that all the time. In a reserve F-18 squadron, that's 110 full-timers and about 140 part-timers. So you're getting that thing for cheap on the manpower. Plus, you fly the squadron about 2/3 what you fly an active duty squadron. So from an economic standpoint, you're getting it.
That's a great point. I need to get you and Lena Kamen together. She is the Commodore over Redcom at the Joint Reserve Base.
I've been mentoring Lena for years.
Really?
Yeah, I know her very well.
She is a phenomenal human being, man. All right, we're going to be coming back after a word from all of our partners. This is Veterans Impact Show. Go Navy. We're here for you.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
Man, this is just too much fun for me because this is a very dear friend, old friend. I met him, and I want to go back to the early part of the program. I met him when he was vice commander of recruiting. We did a bunch of programs. Then I called him, and he is vice commander of the 5th Fleet. That is the Mediterranean Fleet, and he was in Bahrain. You came up, and you had some fabulous adventures. We talked about your war story, which was great. But your commands, to command the 5th Fleet, wow. That is huge.
Well, let's make it just to be perfectly accurate. I did not command the Fifth Fleet except for as an acting commander. So when the 3-star boss would leave, all numbered fleets are commanded by 3 stars. When the boss would leave, sometimes he would leave me in charge. It depended on who else was around, but I had been in charge, which was an amazing thing for a guy whose primary job is an airline pilot. But I would go out there for the 2 years that I served there. I was there 200 days out of each year and ended up making 19 separate trips to the Middle East, including one where we nearly went to war with Iran over some of Iran's misbehavior out there. So that's something that's going on right now as well. What was interesting about my particular path and being out at the Fifth Fleet was getting a front row seat to policymaking by this nation. President Trump was our commander in chief at the time. He was our president. He was in his first term. He made the decision to get out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which was the Iran nuclear deal.
It was a bad deal.
Yeah, it was a bad deal. It was set up by the Obama administration. The reason it was a bad deal, and I've heard Democratic senators talk about this, and they're dead wrong. They say that it was a good deal because it provided a framework for monitoring. That's essentially what they lean on. In reality, it was a bad deal because it gave Iran an opportunity to sell oil and make money. And the theory was that they would take this money and invest it in infrastructure and in their people, and that would, freedom would blossom in Iran, and it would go very well. In reality, what happened was Iran took all those profits and used them to further destabilize the region. The Houthis that are now in Yemen have become stronger as a result of a civil war that was going on in Yemen. They became stronger because they were funded by the Iranians. The Iranians fund Hezbollah, they fund Hamas, they're in Iraq, they're in Syria, they're in Lebanon, and they're all over that Middle East region. And quite frankly, they are the destabilizer in the region. They are leading that effort.
May I ask you a loaded question?
Sure.
And I don't know if there is an accurate answer, but are they contributing backdoor funds somehow to destabilize our country? Because that's what I'm seeing. These are not peaceful protests that people want to be peaceful. They're not turning into that at all. And they're being funded. Matter of fact, Christina Walton published a letter saying that she had funded some of these quote unquote peaceful protests. Sam Walton's daughter. But is some of that money, do you think some of that money is being backdoored in to destabilize this country?
It's entirely possible. Whether it is or is not, I don't know. I can tell you this, we're playing right into their hands when we have those protests. Those I don't need a king protests, the protests in support of Palestine, the protests that say that there's genocide that the Israelis are committing towards the Palestinians in Gaza, all of that stuff is playing right into the narrative that supports Iran. The worst thing that could happen in the Middle East would be for Iran to have a nuclear weapon.
Worst thing that could happen in the Middle East is for Iran to get any kind of power position, real serious power position.
Correct.
And one of the things is we've got 2 carrier task force within that region right now. Mm-hmm. And so we've got air power. I would say to the Iranians, hear Woody's story and how people, we didn't even fire a shot and it scared them half to death. Right now, Israel controls the air over Iran, completely controls the air over Iran. They have the control. And I think that it won't be long before that control, they'll get who they're after.
Let's remember that not firing a shot thing. The reason deterrence works is because deterrence is credible. So if somebody thinks that you have a gun and it's loaded and it's pointed at you, then that gun is a no-kidding threat and you will back down. But our deterrence and our military needs to be strong, and that threat needs to be credible in order for that deterrence to work. We need to keep going down the path we're going down. I like the way we're doing it now.
I do too, and I think it's great because strength and honor and courage as well as appropriate strategy and restraint.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I see. The previous administration just sold us out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm saying that. Woody, this has been an amazing conversation. And in a couple of words, what would you say to a young man or woman? Well, you mentored Lena Kamen.
I did.
What would you say to a young man or woman about start your career, start your life after school in the military?
It goes to this. If you have any desire to serve in the United States military, number one, if you haven't thought about it, you should. Number two, if you're thinking about it, take the leap. Go to the recruiting office. Go to as many recruiting offices as you can. And I would say not only take that leap, but if somebody tells you no, if the road to the left is closed, take the road to the right. That might be open. So take that leap and keep on leaping.
Oh, by the way, you mentioned the academies. You did not mention the Merchant Marine. Merchant Marine.
But it's valid.
Merchant Marine is a 3-year degree, of which is great, and you can go into any branch of the service out of the Merchant Marine.
Not only that, but you might get, well, you will get a license.
Yeah.
And know how to drive a big ship.
Yeah. All right. We close with a prayer. Lord God of the universe, King of the world, we are so thankful for all you do to put a hedge of protection around our active duty military, around our first responders, those who run into the fire instead of away from it. Lord God, we thank you for men and women who serve and are continuing to serve and serve this great nation and help us to bring this nation back together. One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, dear Lord. This we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Woody, it's been a ball to
Same
have
here.
you aboard. Let's come back in the future and talk about then the NROTC programs and how kids can get a college education.
Okay.
Deal? All right. You have a great day. Thank you for being part and share this program.